Hello, Fancy community. I hope you're doing well. This is your girl, Fancy Wainaina, and as you know, I'm your host at the Fancy Talk Show. Welcome to our first talk show, year 2024, and I'm so delighted to bring to you a guest who is familiar to you all, and I'd like her to say hi and introduce herself.
Hi, Fancy community. I'm glad to be here. I'm Grace Wanjiku, a counseling psychologist at G-Solace Counselling.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Good to see
Thank you.
So guys, we are here, and today we want to talk about emotional intelligence. As we know, emotional intelligence is very crucial in our lives, and so we would like to hear from a professional. How is what is emotional intelligence? How can we apply it in our life? And so we'll start by introducing Grace. Maybe you can tell us, what is emotional intelligence?
Okay, thank you, Fancy. Emotional intelligence is a skill that one has, and they are able to know their emotions, how their emotions affect them, as well as how they affect the people surrounding them.
Okay.
It's just in simple terms, that is what it would mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe you can go further and tell us, what does emotional intelligence comprise of? Because it may be a jargon to our viewers, maybe this word is used casually and people don't know the deeper meaning of this. What does it comprise?
Okay, there is a psychologist who was called Daniel, and there are some components that he came up with, and there are 5 of them. I think we can start by looking at those. The first one is self-awareness.
Okay.
This means that as a person, you are very aware of you're very conscious of your emotions. You're very conscious of your emotions. You can name what you're feeling. Because sometimes you find there are people who don't even know. They know they're feeling something, but they can't even put a name to it. So being self-aware means that you know when you're angry, you know when you're disappointed, you know when you're happy. You can tell, you can put a name to it. That's all about self-awareness, and that's the first component. The second component is self-regulation. This means that you're able to regulate your emotions such that you do not affect the people who are around you in a negative way. For example, if you are angry at someone, you will not have an outburst on someone else just because you are angry. Maybe you made me angry, and then when I go out there, I'm angry at someone else. Self-regulation means that you can be able to regulate your emotions and handle them in a positive way. So that's the second component. The third component is empathy. That means that you can look at life from someone else's point of view. It means that when you're having conversations with someone, even if you don't necessarily understand or know what they feel, you can put yourself in their shoes and you're able to have a conversation with them by understanding what they are going through. So that's the third one, it's empathy. The fourth one that we have is social skills. That means that you can be able to deal with all types of social situations. When you go to a social setup, no matter the type it is, you can be able to navigate it. If it's a place where you need to be cool and calm, you'll be cool and calm. If it's a place that you need, maybe for example, to present, you'll be able to do that. This means that you're able to deal with every type of social situations. You have the skills to navigate all types of social situations, because you find there are some people who, in some social setups, they'll be blank.
Yeah.
But when you have skills, you can handle all types of social setups. That's the fourth one. And then the last one is motivation. By motivation, we means what is driving you as a person. And when it comes to motivation, Daniel was explaining in such a way that it's intrinsic. That means that it comes from you, not necessarily the usual things that we are used to do, to hearing, fame, money, status. No, it means that you want to develop yourself. That's the best type of motivation. That's the last one. So the 5 are self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, social skills, and the last one is motivation. Yeah, those are some of the components that he was a psychologist. He was called Daniel Coleman, and he has written a book on emotional intelligence. Those are some of the 5 components that he came up with.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just listening to you, and you know, as you explain the components of emotional intelligence, I'm really thinking of the world we are living, or the society. We are at times where I think self-regulation is a problem. I think people are like a timed bomb. You know, something so small is making one to snap and do the unthinkable. So you could maybe tell us how emotional intelligence is related to our mental wellness.
There is something that you mentioned about self-regulation, and mostly it's taught when you are a child. So when you're growing up, a small child cannot regulate themselves. So the caregiver is the one who helps a child to regulate their emotions. So if your caregiver did not do a good work of training you as a child on how to self-regulate, even when you become an adult, you'll have a problem with self-regulation.
Okay.
So when you realize you have that problem, it means that you have to be very conscious. You have to start learning about your emotions, because like I said before, there are people who cannot even say what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Because if you grew up in a home where emotions were not talked about, you
Always
are told
suppressed.
if it was suppressed, you are told don't cry, why are you sad? And those are normal emotions. When something happens and you'll be disappointed. When someone maybe hurts you, maybe when someone betrays you, you'll feel angry, so if you grew up in an environment where you are told you're not supposed to be angry, you learn how to suppress your emotions. That means even when you grow up, you'll not be in tune with your emotions. So even when you're angry, you'll suppress it. And at the end of the day, when you suppress anything, they will reach a time where something small will make you snap, because you've been piling it up. So eventually it becomes like a volcano which will erupt. So these are skills that are taught in childhood. So when you don't have that, even when you become an adult, it becomes a challenge for you to be self-regulatory. I don't know if I've answered your question, Fancy.
Yes, you have, and it has opened another question. And I'm wondering, in Fancy Talk Show, we say it's a space of learning, unlearning, and relearning. So is it possible for an adult who is very intentional with their self-discovery, to be able to unlearn how they were made to feel, for instance, especially for, the boy child? We bring up boy child really suppressing their emotions, something I really don't like. In fact, if I find my son crying, I don't tell them, stop crying, men don't cry. I let him go through that. I let him go through the pain. I let him, process, because I've realized that is a challenge. So I'm wondering, is it something an adult can relearn, and be able to be like, fine, this is how my adult was. My childhood was, but now I'm very intentional, okay? And so in this journey of being intentional, I want to improve on my emotional intelligence. And so when I'm in pain, I want to be in that pain. I want to process the pain. I don't want to look for shortcuts, to suppress the pain. I want to go through the pain, because I believe that is the only way, someone can have, should I say, a balanced mental wellness life. I don't know whether that's making sense, but is it possible to unlearn what you were not taught and be able to learn, the proper emotional intelligence that will make your life easy?
That's a good question, but it's doable. It's hard, it's just like learning a new skill. It takes time.
Yeah.
But then when you're very intentional about it, it's doable.
Yeah.
And the first thing that you have to do as a person is to accept that that is something that you lacked in your childhood.
Yeah.
not necessarily to blame your caregivers,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I'm a believer in people give what they have. You cannot give what you don't have. So if you are not taught that, it means that even them, they were not taught that. So as you are trying to change that narrative, it will involve you, first of all, it's like you are going to reparent yourself. That's what we call it, reparenting yourself. It's going back to your childhood days and telling yourself that it was okay to cry. It was okay to feel hurt. It was okay to feel angry. It was not bad. Because when we tell children not to get angry, not to get sad, it's like we are telling them what they are feeling is not okay. Yet it's very okay. Each and every one of us gets these emotions. We get angry, we get happy, but now growing up, it's like we were taught only positive emotions, in quotes, were good.
Yeah.
And some emotions like anger, like sadness, they were discouraged. So it will mean you going back to your childhood and telling yourself back then that it was okay. What you felt did not mean that you are a weird person, that you're a bad person. And it would mean being intentional, even in small things, in very small things. When you feel angry, you'll tell yourself, I'm angry because this happened, so that you can understand why you're feeling angry. I'm sad because I didn't get maybe that job promotion. You'll give yourself even time to process what you're feeling, because like you said, if you're not in touch with your emotions, you cannot deal with what is disturbing you. So you'll find it's doable. It's a process. It's a slow process, but it is doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you explain, one thing I love, about your explanation is that you are giving us hope. All is not lost, because we can still relearn this. Now, what can a person do to improve their emotional intelligence? The minute you come to terms with, I'm suffering one component of emotional intelligence, maybe I'm suffering from maybe self-awareness, self-regulatory or social skills. What can one do, to improve their emotional intelligence?
Okay, I think we can mention a few because there are many. One thing that you can start by doing is to start being aware of how you feel, and accepting that how you feel is also affecting at times what you do and how you react. When you're angry, you pause and you think to yourself, I'm angry. Why am I angry? You try and find out what is making you angry so that you can deal with that emotions. It takes time, especially if you don't even have a name to put on what you're feeling, but it's a slow and sure process. If you start slow, the more you do it, the more you become very conscious. When something happens, you're like, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling happy, so you start by being more self-aware. You pause in your day and you're like, I'm feeling this. If you can write your thoughts, what you're feeling at that time, how it made you feel. For example, there are people who love journaling. If you can do that, you can write your thoughts. I was angry. Why was I angry? I was angry because this and this happened. How did it affect me? Maybe you shouted at someone, I did this and this. So the next time you'll be angry, you'll first of all pause before doing that thing that you felt was not good that you did the last time. So that is one thing you can start by doing, being more self-aware. The second thing is that you start learning how to regulate yourself. And I think that we have mentioned before. You start by going back to you growing up and reassuring your younger self that it was okay to do what you did, even if it was not encouraged, even if it was discouraged. It's okay now to do that, so that you can learn how to manage your emotions. Another thing that you can do is you can learn how to say no to people, because sometimes even if every time you're told to do things you're a yes person, you end up being a people pleaser. And when you're a people pleaser, it ends up making you angry at everyone, because the fact that you cannot say no makes you feel that the other person is unfair to you, yet you as a person cannot even have that strength to say yes or no. So when you're a people pleaser, you find yourself that you're angry at everyone, yet the people around you think that you're a good person because you're always there for them, but they don't know that you're exhausted. You just assume that they know. So even that is a step in having emotional intelligence, being able to have boundaries, being able to say no, which is actually very uncomfortable for many of us. We are used to, you can't say no.
Entitlement.
Yeah, and it's such a way such that even when you tell someone no, they'll ask you why. But when you tell them yes, they don't ask why.
Yeah.
So people need to learn that even a no is an answer. You might ask me to do something for you, I'll say no. You don't have to just ask why.
We actually say it's a complete sentence.
It is. So even when you learn how to have boundaries, you know when to say no, it makes you able to handle other people. And you'll not be angry. Maybe you've asked me to do something for you, I said yes, but I didn't want to do it. So I'll be angry at you. And you don't even know that I didn't want to do that. So that's something else that you can do. Another thing that you can do is try and practice empathy. And that is something that we are lacking so much. You find we just want to view things from our perspectives. And that means even when someone comes to you and they are down, the first thing you'll say is like, even me, I'm like this. You forget that you'd have first of all listened to that person.
It was not about you.
Yeah, it was not about you. It was about the other person. You first of all listen to what they're saying. Try and look at it from their view. But sometimes we find that, I don't know if it's being self-centered, but it's like it's something that is so subconscious. You find ourselves, when someone tells you they're going through something, you want to bring out what you're going through. So when you practice empathy, you'll find that your emotional intelligence also increases, because you find that empathy is one of the components of emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Wow. You know, I'm just, as you speak, I'm also picking areas that I feel I'm short, and I also need to work on them. And so maybe as we wind up on the first, section of this, maybe you can tell us, how does emotional intelligence marry with personalities? Because you will get like, there are extroverts who are very spoken, and they're known to be people pleasers sometimes. And maybe they're introverts who are not comfortable. And maybe I'm trying to relate with what you've told us, and I'm thinking maybe some personalities could suffer some components of emotional intelligence. For instance, for an extrovert, maybe it's very easy to have a social skill because of the nature of their personality. For an introvert, that may be a challenge. So how do we marry this, even as we observe to keep our boundaries?
Never thought it from that perspective. Very interesting. But I think there is a point that reaches, you have to accept who you are, first of all. If you're an extrovert, if you're very social, you first of all accept yourself the way you are. But also, you try and learn to put boundaries. You know, sometimes people will say she's the friend who does it. Yeah, she's always comfortable doing that. She never complains.
Yeah.
But sometimes you might not complain, but it's making you feel exhausted.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we are still human. And there are times when you feel that you need to say no, but just because there are those expectations that maybe your friends have put up, like Fancy can never say no, Fancy is our go-to girl, Fancy is always there for us. So sometimes you find, even as a person, it will get overwhelming at the end of the day, because if you find yourself, you are doing things even when you don't want to, you become bitter at the end of the day. There is a day when it reaches and you will feel that these people are taking advantage of me. So sometimes it's good to try and create a balance. If you know that it's difficult for you to say no, you can start by telling your friends. You know, sometimes you tell me to do things and I'm not in a position to do, but I just find myself, I say yes. So if you do that, you'll have, if they are your friends, your real friends, they'll try and give you more space. But I actually never thought of it from that perspective, which is quite interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Grace, we are very happy for what you've taught us. And, I'm actually looking forward for part 2. And I hope our viewers are too looking forward for part 2. Because this is a very crucial, topic. We are always telling people, I feel like we use emotional intelligence so casually out here. But you never go to the deeper meaning of this. So guys, keep tuned for part 2. Thank you.